Hey y'all, just wanted to pop in here real quick, cause I'm sure many of you are confused. This is a re-upload of the Onikakushi-hen video. For whatever reason, after 2 years, the video received several copyright claims, making it blocked globally. I'm really not sure why that video specifically got claims, given that I've been doing Higurashi content for like 5 years now, but you know, whatever. Unfortunately, the company would not even remotely hear me out. I emailed them, I messaged their global accounts on Facebook and Instagram, to which I got no replies. But even if they wouldn't talk to me, they still sure as hell did not agree with the video being fair use. So here I sit now with a copyright strike. This means that my channel is on probation, and if I get 2 more, it'll be permanently deleted. As you can imagine, YouTube has done nothing to help me with it. Very classic YouTube maneuver. I re-uploaded this video probably around a month ago after receiving a strike, and even though I made changes to the areas that Frontierworks claimed before, they claimed pretty much the entire video on re-upload. Obviously, I can't just not have an installment available on YouTube for the Timeline series, especially for Onikakushi-hen of all arcs. Many people really loved the original video as is, so I didn't want to remake the video and get rid of a video that was so enjoyed. So the approach I took for this was to go through and remove all clips of the Studio Dean adaptation for Higurashi. Now, when I specifically have to talk about the anime, I'll pop up in this little library, and the clips I talk about will just be a screenshot on this TV. This may make kind of for a jarring viewing experience, given how different this will be from the other timelines, but you know, I gotta do what I gotta do to make sure this video doesn't get taken down for a 3rd time. I'm sorry that it can't just be a direct re-upload. I really wish I could do that, and hopefully in the future this won't happen again. Frontierworks, if you're watching this video, fuck you. Mulbeat, if you're watching this video, suck my ass. For everyone else, enjoy Onikakushi-hen. Welcome back to my Higurashi Timeline series, where in each episode we will go over every single available arc of the franchise when they happened, forming the ultimate Higurashi Timeline. This involves the manga arcs, the console arcs, the anime arcs, and the visual novel arcs. The last 2 videos have covered everything necessary to discuss before getting into the main meat of the series. So now it's finally time to dive into the very good stuff. These videos are in no way a replacement for the actual Higurashi medias. If you wish to support the Higurashi manga, visual novels, or animes, there will be links in the description.
あの時うるさいほどに泣いていた日暮は今にして思えばこれから始まる全てのことを俺に教えようとしていたのかもしれない。
Now, an important gap we need to fill before we talk about anything else is how we got to where we are currently. In the last video, we talked about Himatsubushi, where Rika claimed a lot of people would die in the near future, including herself. The reason for this is because she has begun looping through time. In the summer of 1983, Miyo Takano would fake her own disappearance in a grand scheme to kill Rika Furude. She wants to do this because her research of a syndrome exclusive to Hinamizawa has led her to Rika. Without going too deep into all the intricacies, because we'll save it for later, she believes the syndrome is calmed by Rika and that she is the queen carrier of the disease. So to prove her theory, she wants to kill Rika and watch the entire town reach terminal stages of the syndrome. Due to this, after faking her own death, she attacks Rika and pins her down, ripping out her insides and killing her. Hanyuu was present for this murder. Although we never got to see it, Rika has been able to see Hanyuu since her birth, and the two have grown extremely close. There are even many instances where Rika chose Hanyuu over her own mother, despite no one else being able to see Hanyuu. Because of their strong familial bond, and also likely because Rika has a striking resemblance in personality and appearance to Oka, Hanyuu uses her Ryuugu power to help Rika find the path to a happy life. While I'm sure she wishes she could do more, she really just can't now that Oak is deactivated. So thanks to our setup and knowledge from Kotohogushi-hen, this is how the main story of Higurashi started. Rika is able to traverse Kakera, or fragments in another dimension after death, where she searches aimlessly for the world that she and everyone else will get to live. The catch is that she can't remember anything a few hours before her death, and with every death her loops grow shorter and shorter. I talked about this a little bit in the last video because I wasn't sure why, but now I know that they get smaller every time. We see 7 main timelines she's gone through on her journey, and those make up the core 4 question arcs and the 3 answer arcs of the series, with the 4th answer arc being the ending. This is stuff I'm sure you all already know, but I'm repeating it again in case you need a refresher or in case you have no idea what's going on in Higurashi. In which case, how did you find your way here? What are you doing here? Anyways, now that that's out of the way, we can get to talking about the first arc of this video, Onikakushi-hen, or the Spirited by the Demons arc. This arc is the first one we all would have seen to get us into the series, as it's the first arc of the anime, the manga, and the visual novel. Released in 2002, this was the start of everything, and what has brought many of you here to my channel. As per what I've set up in the last video with Himatsubushi-hen, I will be covering all 3 mediums and cross-analyzing them to give you the full picture of this arc. Also, this video will mark a change in schedule. This series was meant to be monthly, but as I'm sure you can see, this isn't September. Actually, we're not even close to September anymore. This is being released like 6 months or more after the last one came out. You see, this was originally meant to cover the remaining 3 question arcs of the series, but it took me 1 month and then some to make it through Onikakushi-hen in all forms. Then I jumped into making a video for it right afterwards, while also making the Chainsaw Man video that came out after that last timeline video, and it led to me doing the equivalent of speedrunning Burnout. Anyways, since it took me a good while to work through Oni, I'm going to assume the others will need an equal amount of time, and I want to be able to upload other videos in the gaps, which I can't do if everything is focused on these timelines. So it is a necessity for this channel, and obviously for the sake of my sanity, that these videos be spaced out a little more. I hope you can understand. With that being said, let's hop right into the contents of this video. The story for Onikakushi starts where most might not expect it to, with Oishi in the Okinomiya police station. He has fallen asleep at the station and wakes up wondering if he needs something else to do in his life that isn't detective work. This is funny because we know from Himatsubushi-hen that this something he's looking for ends up being a dance class in the future. His thoughts lead him to standing up and reading a file he has about the, quote, mysterious deaths and disappearances in Hinamizawa. He notes that this town worshipped their deity god, Oyashiro-sama, but that the village is gone now, and those left of it have scattered. This means that the great Hinamizawa disaster has already happened at this point in time. After this, we move an undisclosed amount of time to the past, where Keiichi Maebara is killing Rena Ryuugu. In the anime, we see him coldly killing both Rena and Mion, but in the visual novel, to our knowledge, he kills just Rena in a very mournful manner. He cries many, many tears, and goes on about how he's going to miss her kindness, her adorable smile, petting her head, and her demur, and that he more than likely did love her. This is a very prevalent theme throughout the arc in every medium, but the Dean adaptation, where Keiichi and Rena seem to be extremely interested in one another romantically, at least for this arc. I haven't dove in super hard to the other ones quite yet, but in Oni it is just very hard to ignore. There is lots of flirting, blushing, and even hand-holding between these two, and this makes me happy because I think these two are really cute together. Sorry, K-Me fans.
It should have been me!
We see a little bit of this adapted in Higurashi Go, but that is not the same arc, so that will not be talked about here. Anyways, we then go a little farther back in time to Keiichi saying that he feels like someone has been apologizing to him. Apologizing for a long time at that he's getting annoyed by her persistent and heartbreaking sounding apologies, and whoever she's apologizing to should just forgive her already. This person apologizing is none other than Hanyuu, as she feels guilty and responsible for what happens to Keiichi, Rena, and Mion, and everyone in the town, honestly. However, this also could be Rena, and this could be the first inklings of Keiichi remembering a past fragment for reasons we'll talk about later. Keiichi's dad wakes him up out of his current state as they've arrived back home in Hinamizawa. Keiichi has some complicated history. I know these events aren't talked about in this arc, but I'm going to talk about them regardless to give some more context to his character, since this arc is primarily about him. As a child, he didn't feel like he was great at much, but he took an IQ test that proved he was actually very smart. Because of this, he was put in higher placement classes and did his absolute best because he loved being praised by his parents and his teachers. And he also got more money in allowance. One day, they stopped being so proud of him, but their expectations of him continued to escalate higher and higher. This was complemented by him being bullied by the people around him since he was generally much smarter, receiving his IEP earlier than the others. An IEP, for those that aren't aware, is a form or notice that a child is accepted into special education, meaning they are pretty smart cookies. He became very frustrated and used allowance money he received to buy an airsoft gun. He used it for a while on pieces of cardboard, but saw the do nots in the instruction manual as a way to rebel against his parents. He would shoot it at smaller kids that walked by, likely because they seemed much happier and connected to their families than he felt, along with the fact that he might have associated them with the bullying he received at school from his classmates. This brought him great satisfaction, but one day he accidentally shot a little girl right in her eye. He felt incredibly guilty for the act that he committed and confessed to his parents everything. Although they were obviously disappointed in him, they were also upset with themselves for not paying more attention to their son. Because of this, they used the wealth they've accumulated from the dad's painting job to move to Hinamizawa for a fresh start. The Maebara family had left town for a few days to attend a funeral, and while they were out, Keiichi apologized to the girl he shot. While reluctant at first, she does forgive him and gives him back the bullet that he shot her with. He uses this as a reminder to be a better person, and his new life at Hinamizawa he's using to try and become the best version of himself he can be. This will make sense for his actions throughout other arcs, but not so much in this one. In this fragment, Keiichi doesn't seem to have learned his lesson too well. Back to the current story, now that they're back, Keiichi couldn't be happier. One of the reasons he couldn't wait to come back was so he could see the most iconic girl in the series, Rena. She always arrives early near Keiichi's so that he won't have to wait for her, and because of her acts of kindness, he uses this as methods to tease her. She gets upset because she thinks he's being genuine, but then he flips it on her head like a Sour Patch Kid and hits her with a really sweet one-liner.
ありがとう。
レナが来るまでずーっと待ってる。いつまでも。
He teases her a lot more in the visual novel than he does in pretty much any other medium, then proceeds to pat her on the head as she blushes, and they leave to go meet up with Mion. Mion's introduction is handled differently in pretty much every medium. In the anime, she just slightly teases him for being gone 2 days. In the visual novel, she teases him a lot and claims to be an expert at gathering information, which includes Rena's measurements. In the manga, she taunts him with the possibility of her breasts growing. She also taunts him with the prospect of feeling them. The manga, at least for the first arc, has a lot of moments like this, where it's obsessed with Mion's breasts or has her acting overly sexual. She shoves her chest in Keiichi's face at one point, they zoom in on them a lot when she's in a swimsuit, and in a good amount of the panels, the artist goes out of their way to draw where Mion's nipples would be. I'm not gonna lie, not a fan of how they portray Mion in the manga for this arc. The gang arrives at school to a trap set up by Satoko, the trap master. She had set up a very elaborate trap for Keiichi to stumble into when he arrived, and almost got caught in it too. This entire part of her personality involving traps was largely left out of the Dean anime adaptation, and was something I didn't know was a part of her personality until I started watching Higurashi Go. Although he's initially in pain, Rika is there to help him feel a little bit better. Something funny about this scene is that in the drama CD version of this arc, which is the first version to be recorded by the cast, Rika used her mature voice for the entire run-through, and here she really does sound as if she was someone living the same week over and over again. She sounds so done with everything.
圭一の痛いの痛いの飛んでいけです。腰とかはくじかなかったですか？こうして撫でていれば
I will say that I also think Satoko missing Keiichi was a cute touch. This hints at their brother-sibling bond that would develop over the series. Of course, it's just another thing that wasn't in the anime. Later at school during lunch, a food argument would break out, where a long-running joke in the series where Satoko can't tell the difference between cauliflower and broccoli was created. From this point on, it's a lot of stuff that most of the people watching this video are probably already familiar with. After class, Rena asked Keiichi if he was busy, met with some teasing of course, but she asked because she wanted to show Keiichi around with Mion's help. In the visual novel, it's very obvious this flusters the two of them a lot, but in the manga it shows the two thinking that it's a date and they go on this outing by themselves with no Mion. The next day comes and they take their walk around the town where Keiichi is able to meet most of the village. They then end up moving to the shrine to eat the millions of foods that Rena has prepared, with Satsuko and Rika joining them. Once that was wrapped up, they decided to take a detour on their way home to Rena's, quote, treasure pile, which is the Hinamizawa dump. We learned in the last video that this dump is the creation of the Onikakushi Defense Alliance, which seems to remain to this day to uphold their claims of illegal dumping. Rena leaps into action to look for something cute, while Keiichi gets jump scared by everyone's favorite freelance photographer, Tomitake Jirou. Who, this is actually pretty cool here, I voice in the Higurashi Abridged. The second episode just came out very recently after this video will be coming out, and I really recommend you guys go check it out. This one, in my opinion, is really kick-ass, and I think that you guys will absolutely enjoy it. Don't watch it now though. Check it out after this is over. It'll be in the description, and there will be a pinned comment within it too. Studio Weeb7, you guys rock, and I'm gonna shout you out every time I have the opportunity to. He asks what Rena's doing, and Keiichi replies with a morbid joke about her fiddling with a dismembered body. To his surprise though, Tomitake replies as if there was an actual dismembered body around. He questions Rena later about it, but is met with a very quick, I don't know, and a denial manner. This would be the spark of a morbid curiosity in him that would grow to be a lot more. The next day he goes to school, plays games with them in their game club, and after it's all over asks Mion if she knows anything about what happened. To his surprise, she also immediately shuts him down and acts as if nothing happened. This isn't enough to satiate Keiichi's growing curiosity though. He pops by his house very briefly where his mom and dad discuss the dad's job being in a bad position, and his dad being a bit of an asshole, so he leaves to go meet up with Rena. She appreciates him appearing to help pull out a huge Colonel Sanders statue. He ends up being there for hours and tires himself out, so Rena, being the great girl she is, runs to her house to get him some tea. While she's gone, he finds a pile of magazines and decides to rip through them to find answers for his questions. Very surprisingly, he found what he was looking for. In June of 1979, 1 year after Akasaka visited and the events of Himatsubushi are supposed to take place, there was a murder at the dam construction site. The person that died was present during Akasaka and Oishi's game of Mahjong and died because he fell victim to stage 5 of Hinamizawa syndrome. The reason he fell victim to the syndrome was likely because he was met with shitty treatment from the village and crazy peer pressure by his co-workers. On the night of the cotton drifting festival of that year, he snapped and tried to kill the people he worked with. They realized he was acting differently compared to normal, and after his aggression, they kill him. And to hide their crimes, they dismember his body into 6 pieces, one for each of the construction workers. They would later all, except for one, turn themselves in, but with lack of context, Oishi assumed the Sonozakis framed the workers and were the ones truly responsible for the death of his friend. After this, he would begin his investigations on the town, and specifically the Sonozaki family. Of course, this wasn't all in the magazine though. This is from another portion of the story. All Keiichi knows is that there were murders committed and that some people were arrested, but they don't know who the exact true culprit was. Anyways, back to what's going on. As Keiichi read the magazines, Rena appears again with a hatchet and some tea. The hatchet freaks them both out, but Rena says that she only brought it because Keiichi wanted a tool earlier. He shakes this off, drinks the tea, and they come back by the next day, successfully getting the Colonel out. A little bit of time passes, and it's now time for the Cotton Drifting Festival. Crazy that a tradition that started in feudal times with Oka is still going on today. There is a lot of flirting going on with Rena and Keiichi here, and in the manga they freak out in blushy messes when they hold each other's hands. Aw, that's nice. They run into Mion and the gang, where Mion shoots Keiichi with her airsoft gun. Honestly, knowing he shot people with one of these makes this kind of ironic, especially since this is one of the only times we see Mion use it. They have a game where they eat as much food as they can when they run into Tomitake. They all cheer him on when he's shy about possibly debuting his photos publicly, and then they let him join in on the group festivities. Honestly, it's a damn shame we never get to see him playing with the gang animated, because I think that this entire sequence is really wholesome. Keiichi and Tomitake even worked together to get Rena a stuffed bear, which is literally just the best. After this, they went to watch Rika's dance, which for those that don't know is a ritual where the shrine priestess slams a hoe into a futon, breaking off pieces of cotton. They then proceed to drift the cotton down a nearby river as a symbolic way of letting go of their sins or their sadness. This practice was not always this peaceful though, as originally on this night they would perform a human sacrifice. They would find a villager that was deemed sinful, and they would slam this ritualistic hoe into them and then drift their intestines down the river. This naturally, in the modern day, was seen to be way too violent, so it was replaced with a much more friendly ritual. After drifting some cotton down the river, he loses track of his group and he finds himself running into Takano and Tomitake. He figures they could tell him about what's happening in the town's past, so he asks and they tell him a lot. The most important part being that every year there are deaths on the day of the festival, and that the reason this festival was so big this year was because everyone was afraid of falling victim to the curse. This clicks in Keiichi's brain that the reason Mion and Rena didn't tell him about it was because if nothing happened that night, the rumors of the curse would completely dissipate. Thankfully, Tomitake does what he can to ease Keiichi's nerves, and he manages to relax him a significant amount. After their conversation ends, his group catches up with him to hang out, and one of the most wholesome things ever happens. The group signs Tomitake's shirt with both supportive and cute messages. I didn't know this scene existed at all until I read the visual novel and the manga, and now that I know it do, I really just wish this was in the anime in some form, because this is just such an adorable moment in the franchise. This sense of cuteness doesn't last for very long though, as the next day during recess he's called to talk to Oishi-san, where he informs Keiichi that Tomitake was found dead and Takano is missing. The reason they linked Keiichi to Tomitake was because his shirt had Keiichi's signature on it. And the reason he was being questioned about it was because of how recent he was to the village. Tomitake's death is unfathomable to Keiichi, but he is eager to help out until Oishi tells him to not talk about it with Rena or Mion. The detective explains to Keiichi that the village might be manually making the curse happen themselves. And although this does worry him, he decides to keep this information to himself as to not worry his friends. This is very different compared to both the anime and manga, where in both mediums the reason he doesn't tell them is because he immediately assumes they're involved and does not trust them. Oishi parts ways with Keiichi and he goes back to have fun with his friends, but he just can't shake their talk off of his mind. The next day Keiichi is pretending to be asleep in school because he couldn't sleep the night before, and he eavesdrops on Rena and Mion talking about the disappearances. Mion uses a phrase which is demoned away, one that is unique to Higurashi. Spirited away is a popular phrase in Japan, meaning that a person has disappeared or died because of a spirit, which could be a benevolent spirit or an angry one. While demon away means the same thing, but in its context, the spirit is always malevolent. Rena is also very worried that she will be next in the disappearances, but Mion assures her that she'll be fine. Eavesdropping definitely made him feel shitty though. A day passes after this, and interestingly enough, Mion working for her uncle is discussed in the visual novel. I like this because this is a great way of threading this plot point into the story to be explored at a later time, because for those of you that don't know, this is discussed in the next arc of the series. Anyways, they play a game for their club, and this leads to him finding a card with the name Satoshi on it. He asks Rena about it, to which she replies kind of similarly to how she did earlier when he asked about the murders. This makes him feel like his friends don't trust him, and this is where a lot of his paranoia starts to come in. They start walking home together, and Rena does her best to comfort him since she can tell he's uneasy. He decides finally to ask her about what's going on, but it seems his paranoia has already grown to a higher stage of the syndrome, as he definitely hallucinates a much meaner Rena. In the first arc, hallucinations of Keiichi's are marked by these cat-like eyes that you see on screen. She confronts him about who the old man was he was talking to, and Keiichi keeps trying to cover his tracks, but he keeps getting caught. After saying it had nothing to do with his friends, Rena utters the absolute most famous line of the entire series. I will say that the visual novel is probably one of the weaker variants of this, because it sounds more like metallic than intimidating. The one in Higurashi Go feels really goofy for reasons I'm not sure about, but I really can never take it seriously. The one in the Dean anime is superb. The animation is honestly pretty spooky, and the voice actress for Rena literally screams in the microphone. I will say that the best one I've seen so far is the manga version. This one is genuinely scary. If they had put some voice acting on this, it would be on another level. We are not going to talk about the live action ones, especially the JAV one, because there's a JAV version of Higurashi for some reason, but one of the adaptations that's live action has a really funny one that I just had to show you guys. Like, bro, what is this? She finishes by telling him that they all have secrets they'd like to keep, just like him, and then he heads home. I'd like to point out that this conversation is probably accurate, as most of them are pretty accurate, but the tone is hallucinated. Rena is probably asking him calmly about who the officer was, and when she's referring to secrets, odds are she's talking about her parents' divorce or her grim past with Oyashiro-sama. The reason she was probably asking about who the officer was, as he's very infamous for being a symbol of Oyashiro-sama, since whoever he interacts with ends up disappearing shortly after. He goes home and is completely distressed about what happened when Oishi calls. Oishi tells him that there's a pattern with the deaths every year, where one person disappears and the other is found dead. He then tells him that Satoshi was one of the people that disappeared, and this freaks him out because Satoshi sat right where he did in his class and was connected to his friends. Because of this, he believes that Oyashiro-sama's curse is now directly connected to him. He asks about Rena since he's worried for her well-being, and Oishi tells him that he'll look into her. Their call is ended abruptly because Keiichi's dad rushes in, and to his horror, asks him how things with Rena went. Rena wasn't there in the room, ever, nor did he know she was there. And she apparently was leaving as his dad was coming up, which means that for almost an hour, she was standing outside of his door, listening in. This freaks the balls off of Keiichi, thinking his friend was spying on him. Although I will say, I find this very ironic since he was eavesdropping on them earlier at school. Since he was doing it, it makes sense he assumes his friends would do it too. This is also just Keiichi's paranoia. The reality of this is that Rena dropped by his house to talk to Keiichi because she was worried about him, and upon arriving heard Keiichi talking to a cop about his friends. Naturally, she would have assumed her friend and possible lover didn't trust her, so she left the house upset. This is just an assumption though, because we don't know what was actually going through her head here, but we do know the intent was likely not malicious. He wakes up the next day, having hardly slept, and he stays home from school thinking that he's got a cold. In the manga and the anime, he clearly lies about this, but in the visual novel, he does seem to think he might be sick. He took a nap, woke up to his family gone, went to the hospital to get a checkup, and then ran into Oishi. He invites Keiichi out to eat, and the two go to Angel Mort, which for those that don't know is a location near Oishi's work, the next town over, and has some interesting outfit choices. Here, Oishi gives him some village lore that we've already discussed, and he informs him about how almost all the disappearances involve people related to his friend group, except for Rena. Rena was actually suspended from her school for breaking literally every window on her campus. To make matters all the more lovely, really absolutely ease Keiichi's nerves as much as possible, Oishi's parting words to him are, "You're next." Despite Keiichi being even more shook up about this news, he goes back home and is visited later by Mion and Rena, who bring him Ohagi, or mochi in the visual novel, but I'm just gonna stick with Ohagi. They hit him with a game of figuring out who made which one, and all seems well until they begin to question him about where he went today. The reason for them knowing where he went could be one of three options. The first being the waitresses telling the Sonozaki family that Keiichi was there with Oishi at Angel Mort, which makes sense. The restaurant is owned by the Sonozaki family after all. Or Mion saw Keiichi either going in or leaving with Oishi, since it's confirmed in this arc she does help out at her uncle's shop, meaning she could have been in Okinomiya. Or the third being that Shion saw him with Oishi and told Mion about it, which for those that don't know, Shion is Mion's twin sister that works at Angel Mort. all three are very likely reasons that they'd happen to see him, but all three would be concerning since Oishi is seen, as I said earlier, as a very troublesome figure to the three great families, and to the people of the village. It's because of this that the reality is Mion and Rena are worried about why Keiichi is interacting with such a concerning figure, along with the fact that it probably seems to them that Keiichi is blatantly lying to them about being sick. But since Keiichi is so deep in the syndrome, he interprets this all in a very threatening way. They leave and he's left to his own devices, but tries to calm down and give the Ohagi a go. Like I said, the game is he has to guess which one Rena made, and he's able to deduce it very quickly, but once he gets to actually eating, he finds his mouth bleeding, and that there was a needle inside. Thinking that they were trying to kill him, he throws the Ohagi at the wall in a fit of rage. The reality of this is that the blood is actually Tabasco sauce, and the sharp pain in his mouth was the sauce hitting his tongue. You can also assume that the needle was hair, or it just wasn't there at all, and that he hallucinated it because of the sharp feeling in his mouth. He read a manga about someone putting needles in food and assumed the same thing could happen to him. But yeah, bottom line is this fucker is hallucinating and thinks these two girls are out to kill him. The next day he wakes up, and this is where we get some interesting signs of Hinamizawa syndrome. He really can't taste his food at all. He's oversleeping but not feeling like he slept at all. His body is aching, which with some of these symptoms makes the syndrome sound a lot like Corona. Wait a second, I had COVID. Is that why I got the urge to the urge to kiln? You know, make pottery. Stuff like that, yeah. Yeah. I don't want to kill people. Anyways, he meets Rena outside, who is acting fairly normal. You get a lot of these moments where Keiichi consciously sees that Rena is acting like she always does, which makes you feel all the more bad when you find out that this entire time she was in fact completely normal. On their walk, she simply asks him if he ate the Ohagi. In the manga and anime, this is interpreted in a more ominous way, but in the visual novel, she's her normal self, which is an early hint to readers that she means no harm. Because he couldn't find out which one was Rena's though, he stuck with a punishment game. Keep this in mind for later. One thing that would have been interesting to see adapted somewhere is when Keiichi imagines himself getting beat by Rena when she went around breaking the windows at her school. It also would have been great foreshadowing for how this arc ends. At the end of the day though, it's just another thing that ended up getting cut from the anime, I suppose. Hate to see it. He didn't stay at school that day for game club, and despite everyone clearly being worried about him, he dipped. While he's gone, Rena and Mion are talking about how worried they are about him, and Mion mentions how Keiichi might be demoned away since Oishi met with him. The reason for this, as I said earlier, is that people seem to get very paranoid when they interact with Oishi, which makes them more susceptible to the syndrome. This is probably because they get nervous about talking to a police officer and a detective, and he is kind of intimidating, so it makes sense. The two laugh it off though, but you can tell it's more so nervous laughter. This whole situation is honestly really sad to see. Yes, you know what Keiichi is thinking, and without the benefit of hindsight that I have like right now telling all of you guys about all this stuff, his paranoia makes sense, because we don't know that Rena and Mion actually have good intentions. We don't really know the full extent of what's going on. We think that they are genuinely out to get him. However, you can tell how much his friends are worried about him, and it's very frustrating because you really want to see Keiichi just be honest with one of them, or at least anyone. He doesn't even tell his parents about what's going on. He gets pretty close to talking to them about it, but since he noticed most of the past victims were couples, he decides against it in consideration of his family. But man, I wish he'd just talk to someone. This, of course, doesn't happen. Keiichi doesn't talk to anybody this time around. Later, he decides to write his thoughts down and hide them behind the clock in his room. He goes as far as telling his parents that if he died, to put that clock in his coffin, which is insane. I mean, imagine being parents and your kid coming out and mentioning the fact that they might potentially die, and if they do, this is what they want to happen. That's gotta be awful. This story doesn't draw much attention to Keiichi's parents, but I really do just feel bad for them most of the time, since in a lot of the stories, their kid is dying somehow. The next morning, he heads to school early to look for a way to defend himself, and on his way, he almost gets hit by a van. This could be one of two things. One, the mountain dogs see Keiichi as a threat to their operation and actually do attempt to kill him, although they could have been trying to make him more paranoid. I'm not exactly sure if I mentioned this already, but I'll go ahead and say it again. But the mountain dogs are people that are working for Takano, and Takano is trying to kill Rika to have the entire town reach terminal stages of the syndrome. So because Keiichi is already kind of getting to terminal stages, they're worried that he will mess up their operation in killing Rika somehow, so they try to keep him out of the way. There is also the possibility though that they were going to attempt to grab him and bring him into the Erie clinic to study. But the second option is that Keiichi is hallucinating this as an attack, when in reality he was just kind of being an asshole. I mean, he's standing in the middle of the road and this van is honking their horn at him, telling him to get out of the way, and he just doesn't move. This car can't veer off the road because, as we see in the manga and a bit in the visual novel, the road is surrounded by marshes and water. This would result in this car getting totaled, and I imagine back then they were a lot more scarce and harder to get since the story does take place in the 80s. Naturally, the people in this van expected Keiichi to move to the side, and he didn't, so then they honk to tell him to move out of the way, and he still doesn't move. But that's just my thoughts about what might be actually happening here. Regardless of what I think, Keiichi thinks these people are trying to kill him, and that it's the village in cahoots out to get him. With that being said, he arrives at school anyways, completely covered in mud, and finds a metal bat that we later find out is Satoshi's. He starts practicing his swing for what he claimed was the baseball team, and to his surprise, everyone is pretty supportive of his efforts. Although I will give the anime credit here, as we see Satoko has a very physical reaction to Keiichi using Satoshi's bat. For those that don't know, Satoshi is Satoko's brother that went missing a few years back. She was very dependent on him, and now Keiichi is kind of filling that role for her. So it really messes with your heartstrings knowing that Satoko probably is hurting seeing Keiichi hold something that belonged to her missing brother. Honestly, everyone's reaction in the anime makes much more sense. Them being worried about him acting like Satoshi instead of being supportive of him acting like Satoshi. Although I guess you could argue they're still doing what they can to not worry him. Regardless, he ends up spending the entire day doing this. And to everyone's disappointment, yet again, he leaves with no contributions to the game club. This is another thing the anime does pretty well. You really feel how fucking bummed out everyone is that Keiichi is acting so strange. He feels that someone is tailing him on his way home, and he's right. Rena is following him. She says she's really worried about him, and he tells her to buzz off by swinging his bat at her, which, while the bat scares a lot, she seems more disappointed that Keiichi is acting so coldly towards her. She starts to walk off, but then turns around and asks him why he's doing all the same things Satoshi did before he disappeared. This freaks him out, and he goes home. Once arriving home, he enters his house to find that someone entered his house right behind him. He felt their presence standing there. He decided to reach out and ask who was there, and he felt the person breathing on his back. He recognized it was a girl immediately. He turned around, and to his surprise, no one was there. But he could tell that there was still someone standing there, even though he couldn't see them. This results in him violently swinging his bat, which he could tell scared the shit out of whoever was there, and they ran away. The person that was invisible was obviously Hanyuu, and she was probably there to give her apologies or check in on Keiichi. But as she's noticed, it's too late. I feel bad for her because I would hate to be on the receiving end of a screaming Keiichi. But man, this was a scene that was really just not there in the anime. This is just another thing that hits to Hanyuu's existence, and it was replaced in the anime by him simply just hearing someone's footsteps in the rain. Like, this could literally have been fucking anyone. I remember on my first watch, I thought Rena was probably watching him. I would never have guessed it was an invisible alien Miko creature. Regardless of that, after his freak out with Hanyuu, his parents call him later to say that they're out of the house for a few days. Oh dear. To ease his mind, he sets his house up to be as if his parents had never left, which, I gotta say, is pretty smart, and is a way that people do nowadays to combat burglary. However, it really shows how extremely paranoid he is in this situation. Thankfully, to ease his nerves, he gets a call from the one person he thinks he can trust, Oishi. They talk about what happened since they last saw each other, and when Keiichi brings up the needle, Oishi asks a logical question, which is, did he save it? But much to his dismay, the needle is nowhere to be found downstairs. This is a very big hint to all the viewers and readers that the needle was never really there, since Keiichi's mom questioned him about the stains on the wall because she had to clean them up. She never once asked why there was a needle on the ground, one that was covered in blood at that. While he's on the phone, Rena comes by to talk to him. This scene in the anime is very exaggerated, as it shows Rena being continually aggressive when she actually isn't in this scene remotely aggressive. She's brought him a lot of food that she's made, and Keiichi assumes this is because she knows his parents aren't home. His assumption is correct, because Keiichi mom is trying to set them up a lot through this arc, and this is another one of her attempts since she had asked Rena to come bring Keiichi some food. But I also think that you could draw lines to Rena making him food to comfort him. Rena always seems to have made food for someone as a sign of appreciation, or as a way to show affection. So I imagine that's the case here. But Keiichi assumes otherwise, and starts to shoo her away. He starts to hallucinate Rena's tone, as she asks him why he's lying to her, which in reality is probably that she's really sad that Keiichi doesn't seem to trust her. At probably the worst time she could, literally probably the worst time, she decides to mess with him by guessing what ramen he's eating for dinner because she saw him pick it out earlier with his mom at the grocery store. They were arguing pretty loudly, so it wouldn't have been hard to hear them. Although her and Keiichi share a bit of dark humor that is shown throughout the earlier part of this arc, and her using hints of it here, if it was the normal Keiichi, would work, but it doesn't help her case. She asks him again to let her in, and puts her fingers in the door. Keiichi asks her to leave, and she asks how he could say something so mean to her. This leads to one of the most iconic shots in this arc, and that is him slamming her fingers in the door. And she's begging him to stop, but he just keeps doing it. She says she's sorry if she was messing around too much, and she starts repeating over and over again that she's sorry. She manages to get herself free, but Keiichi still hears her apologizing, so he runs upstairs. There, he can't hear her any longer, and collects himself to resume his call with Oishi. A fierce rain picked up, so Keiichi went to close his cracked window, when down below, he saw Rena in the streets. She was standing as if she were defeated, and she is repeating over and over again that she was sorry. This is what I was referring to earlier, that the apologizing Keiichi heard at the beginning of the story might possibly have been Rena from a past fragment. If this is supposed to be Keiichi remembering past fragments, then this is genius writing, because it foreshadows a good few arcs before it becomes an integral part of the story. Remembering past fragments is like his one superpower as a piece in this game. And for those that don't know, it ends up becoming the core reason Rika was able to bounce back and then escape this hell. Hinting at it in the very beginning of the first fragment is incredibly smart. Well done, Ryu. He never ceases to amaze me with shit like this. Also, it can tell us readers that the events of Oni have already happened, and that this isn't likely the first time Rika is seeing all of this go down. However, if that is the case, it makes the intro sequence very sad, because he wanted whoever she was apologizing to forgive her. And here, he says he won't forgive her. Although it just as equally, as I said at the beginning, could have been Hanyuu. Regardless, the reality of the scene is her apologizing in the rain, heartbroken that Keiichi doesn't trust her, and that is really sad. She came over with a lot of food that she made, per Keiichi's mom's request, and was excited to get the chance to eat dinner with him. She could maybe figure out over dinner what had been going on with him lately. Although when she got there, Keiichi wouldn't let her in, which is a double entendre. He won't let her into his house, and he also won't let her into his head to know what's going on. Because of this, Rena starts joking with Keiichi like they normally did together, after she found out that he was lying, to try to ease the mood, maybe get a few laughs out of him. She thought maybe this would open him up to letting her in, but instead resulted in her getting her poor fingers smashed in a door. This freaks her out, so she starts frantically apologizing to see if that fixes things. We know it doesn't, and she's left outside, where she continues to repeatedly apologize, likely having either a panic attack or she's having a breakdown in the pouring rain. Her hand is bleeding too, as we see. Keiichi is someone she cherishes a lot as a friend. They've shared a lot of great memories together and bonded a lot over their similar circumstances on coming to this town after being a bit of an outsider. There is a huge possibility that she was falling for him romantically too, given their very visible chemistry and how much they would tease each other and hold hands, plus showing other physical affection towards one another. Despite all of that, she has been repeatedly lied to by him. He's verbally shown distrust towards her on the phone to Oishi that she happened to overheard, which probably made her feel exponentially worse. And now, she was shut out of his house after having her fingers crushed. To any teenage girl being put in a situation like that from one of their best friends, even possibly a love interest, I can only imagine how crushing this would be. This is like worst case scenario for somebody. She has no idea why Keiichi randomly has started being so mean to her, and she doesn't know how to fix it either. All she can do is say I'm sorry. Hindsight on knowing how this arc goes just makes you feel awful for her, because you can see she's trying her best to make sure Keiichi is okay, but her attempts all fall flat. Man, this is depressing stuff. I'm going to attempt to lighten the mood here real quick by talking about something else that is not this arc. I'd like to highlight an artist in the community by the name of Because You Are Dead. As I'm sure you can tell, I'm a big fan of When They Cry. And for a while, I was struggling to find a way to get some merch to represent my appreciation for this franchise. Especially Umineko. That series is ancient, and most of the stuff that was sold is no longer on the market or is quite expensive. Like the manga. My homies know the manga for that series is way too expensive. So on my quest for merchandise, I was recommended their Etsy page by my friend Beans, and I've gotta say they have some of the cutest and most expressive merch for Umineko out there. I immediately bought 4 pins for Battler and Angie, my 2 favorite characters in Umineko. I was very excited for them, and when they finally did come in, I was ecstatic because they looked great, and I currently proudly display them and have for about a year on my camera bag and my school bag. They even sent me an awesome note with a drawing of Angie on it, likely because I assume they know about my channel. So I really appreciate this. It's nice to know that people out there know about me. I'm by no means sponsored by them, and I know this isn't exactly Higurashi related, but their work is just so phenomenal that I felt I had to give them some more notoriety, and I also wanted to say thank you. Like, look at this Angie drawing. It's so good. Anyways, back to the sadness of Oni. He wakes up the next day with a hunch that today is the day he'll die. He arrives at school to practice swinging, and Mion goes to talk to him. She asks him to stop swinging that bat, and he says it's not bothering anyone, so why should he? And she said that it is in fact bothering somebody, likely referring to bothering Satoko since it was Satoshi's bat, or bothering all of them since it reminds them of Satoshi. He starts to yell at her for not telling him everything, and she gets pretty flustered and starts to cry. Keiichi asks if she's the one that messed with his Ohagi, and she says it was her. She's confused why he's so upset since to her, it was a little prank, but she doesn't know that to him, he almost swallowed a needle. Although it's ironic because he in his mind thinks that the needle isn't the same thing as putting Tabasco sauce on Ohagi. Oh man, the irony here, right? It's real bad. He tells Mion that she is no longer a friend of his anymore, and that the cops are onto her and her family. And to put the cherry on top, says that she can't make him disappear like Satoshi. This makes her sob. I'm talking full on crying her eyes out. And she tells him that he's really mean. He leaves her to go to the homeroom when he hears her murmuring about wanting to kill Oishi for turning Keiichi against them. I will say, out of all the hallucinations in this arc, this one, more than likely, is probably completely real. Mion is extremely heartbroken right now at his actions, so knowing that Oishi is the one responsible for all of this, there's no doubt in my mind that she actually wants to kill him for what he's done to their friend group. He hardly interacts with anyone at school, and they hardly interact with him back. Once it's over, he starts to head home when he feels someone coming up behind him. He hides in a bush when Rena rolls up, and she starts to taunt him while searching for him. But she's carrying a hatchet. I believe the reason for this is just how Keiichi is carrying his metal bat, for self-defense. She likely recognizes that Keiichi is unwell mentally and is worried that he will attack her. Although from this point out, I think things get a bit exaggerated thanks to the syndrome as she chases him. You can definitely tell it is because she literally teleports around in the anime version. She wants to talk to him because she thinks that if Satoshi had talked to her before he disappeared, that maybe he would still be around. Another really sad moment from Rena. You really feel for her here in this arc. Keiichi's legs eventually give out, and then she starts going off about how Oyashiro-sama is real, that he would know very well, since he should have heard someone constantly apologizing to him, which is a callback to the beginning of the arc. She doesn't plan to let Keiichi disappear, and although she really does want to hear Keiichi out, he pushes her and runs away. The manga shows this entire sequence way differently, as it portrays her chasing him with intent to kill, and once Keiichi falls to the ground, she tries to swing at him. The manga version for this arc is really kind of whack in a lot of places. He runs and finds himself at the site of the dam construction, where he's confronted by the mountain dogs. They are no doubtably there to restrain him, as they've likely realized he's come down completely with the syndrome and have come to give him shots to put it back at bay. After the initial fight, they manage to knock him unconscious, and he wakes up later in his room. Rena is by his side and tells him that she called the doctor and he should be arriving soon. This entire time while he was out cold, she was there by his side and taking care of him. Mion shows up a little later to check on him and asks Rena if she called the manager. Keiichi is confused by who the manager is and asks about it, to which they tease him. He assumes they mean the manager of the dam site, which is kind of crazy because the manager of the dam site is confirmed dead earlier in this arc. But the reality is they mean the manager of the baseball team, and the Dr. Ire. They call him the manager and refer to him as such because they assume he knows who they're talking about, since Keiichi lately has been claiming to be a part of the baseball team. His confusion is interrupted by Mion saying that they should finish up, and if he remembers, he is even more lost now, so Rena reminds him of his punishment game, referring to earlier since he couldn't guess the Ohagi correctly. Rena gets behind Keiichi and holds him down, while Mion pulls out a syringe from her pocket. He doesn't understand what's happening, but Mion says that he should understand exactly what's happening, that they're going to do what they did to Tomitake. You see, that syringe isn't actually a syringe. It's a marker, or a Sharpie. The reason that Keiichi should know what is going on is because this exact same thing happened with their game of Old Maid, where Rena held him down and Mion drew on him. It was the exact same situation, although the one difference this time around was that Keiichi has lost his mind. What they did to Tomitake is referring to when they drew on him, which is another double entendre as they did draw on him, but he was in fact injected by a syringe that caused his death. The visual novel so far has a lot of double meanings, which I think is pretty fucking cool. That's nice. Why didn't more stuff do this? Keiichi's mind goes completely blank, and he reawakens and sees that both his best friends are dead, with him holding a metal bat. While he blanked out, he freed himself from Rena's grasp and grabbed Satoshi's bat, killing Mion. Rena sat in horror at her friend being slaughtered by her other friend, and Keiichi proceeded to beat her too. She had broken bones and her head was split open, but even still, she smiled at Keiichi. She could tell that he was scared, and in her dying moments, she opened up her arms to him and said, "This is heartbreaking. I remember the first time I saw this in the Dean anime. I started crying my eyes out. There's just something so sweet, but so sad about Rena trying to save Keiichi, even at the cost of her own life." Back to Keiichi's mind though, he thinks he needs to live to tell his story to the police. Although as he comes to this realization, Dr. Ire arrives with the mountain dogs and the white van that tried to hit him earlier. Before he books it, he sits down to write another entry into his piece of notebook paper, saying that Mion and Rena are involved and that the dam manager is alive, and he writes that whoever reads this, please find out the truth. He then tapes the syringe to the back of the clock and he books it out his back door. He runs until he gets to a phone booth and rings Oishi up. There is an immediate panic as Oishi dispatches as many people as he can to Keiichi's location. and he could tell that Keiichi is likely clawing at his own throat. To his horror, Keiichi says that he thinks Oishiro-sama is real. He tells Oishi that they're right behind him, and Oishi asks him to look behind him. After that, Keiichi drops the phone, and he almost dies. The police are able to find him and rush him to the hospital, but the blood loss was too much, and he doesn't make it. Later, a document is typed up about the crime. It's interpreted that Keiichi is the one that called Mion and Rena to his house and proceeded to kill them, and that they had a struggle that went throughout the entire house. These quote-unquote struggles were where Keiichi had tried to hit Hanyuu with his bat. They note that the rug had been thrown to the side, which is likely because Keiichi was searching for the needle earlier, especially since they found garbage littered throughout the house with handprints that appeared to be Keiichi's. Again, probably smashing these pieces of garbage to see if a needle is in there. They found the note on the refrigerator asking about the needle and aren't sure what to make out of it. And they find the note behind the clock, but pieces of it were missing and the syringe was missing too. I believe the reason for this is because Oishi was confirmed to have found the note before anyone else, and he likely removed parts of the note and the marker so that Keiichi's message would be more convincing for evidence. Since, after all, Keiichi said the dam manager was alive, which is insane because he wasn't alive, and he said this Sharpie was a syringe when it's definitely not a syringe. After all, this would be the year Oishi would retire, and he didn't want the case to fall flat before he left to, not let his friend die in vain.
これを読んだあなた、どうか真相を暴いてください。それだけが私の望みです。前原圭一。
And with that, Onikakushi-hen comes to a close. After reading the visual novel and the manga, I've gotta say the Dean anime is really slacking. One thing that makes this arc suffer dramatically in the anime is the complete lack of Keiichi's inner thoughts. The visual novel is full of Keiichi thinking, and you understand how and why he's reacting to the situation like he is. The manga has this too, and because of that you feel a deep, genuine connection to him and feel bad for the situation he is in. But there is zero of this in the anime. They really could have used doing like a Monogatari here where we hear a lot of internal dialogue. Granted, I know Monogatari comes out much later on after this first season came out, but really I just don't know why they cut this. This feels very important. And there are also really crucial parts that they have cut out for no reason, such as the beginning where Keiichi hears someone apologizing. All of Rena and Keiichi's bonding is completely missing from the Dean adaptation. The overall possible existence of Hanyuu is hardly hinted at, and they've really changed a lot of scenes where Hanyuu is supposed to be there. Tomitake joining their festival activities was such a missed opportunity, and I don't know why they didn't include that, especially because it's important for this story. And there are also certain pieces of dialogue that hint to what's really going on that are just changed or not included at all. Looking back at the Higurashi anime, this first arc, by all means, is kind of unsolvable until later parts of the show. You don't even really realize it's supposed to be a mystery yet, in my opinion, because I didn't know it was supposed to be a mystery for a good while. But in the visual novel and in the manga, this arc and the entire story are almost completely solvable from the very beginning. They give you a lot to work with. And in the visual novel's case, they give you almost everything you need to work with. Not to mention, Keiichi is a great guy here in the other mediums, while in the anime for the first arc, I couldn't stand him. He's always a fucking little shit. He's rude to everyone. He says the jokes that are darker, yeah, but Rena doesn't, so he just comes off really emo or really sarcastic in really rude ways. He's just kind of unbearable. And without his inner dialogue, he's just being a bitch to all these people for no fucking reason. I don't get that. It doesn't add up. It really doesn't make much sense, and it's not super enjoyable. There were a lot of flaws and things lost in the adaptation, and I think that's a real damn shame. I wish that Go had been a proper remake. We all know how that went down. I will say though that the manga version of this arc had a lot of things, like I said, that I was not a very big fan of, and I think the visual novel is the best way, undoubtedly, to enjoy this arc. My rantings aside about the Dean anime, I think Onikakushi is a phenomenal beginning to the story, and I am thankful that it exists because without it we would have not had Higurashi. I hope that you were able to get a lot from this video, such as cut content, interpretations, or meanings to scenes that you might not have thought about before, or the last nuances of Keiichi and Rena's romance in this chapter. I really think that this one's very enjoyable, and this still holds itself as one of my favorite arcs in the series, because, like I said, it's completely solvable, and you really feel for a lot of the characters in here because of the things that happen to them, and all this miscommunication. It's just really good. I love it a lot. With that being said though, thank you Jim and Ray for supporting me on Patreon, and I will see you guys in 2 months for the next arc, Watanagashi-hen.